Space Marine 2 has been out for about 2 weeks now, so given that we've now had enough time to play through and see everything that the game has to offer, here's our honest review. So right off the bat, is this game worth buying? If you want the short answer, yes. Starting off with the most surface level, but also one of the most notable things about the game, is that the game has incredible graphics. The set pieces are massive, the texture quality is incredible, and they do a great job of modeling everything from the enemies to the shell casings on the ground to the Marines you're playing as, and just making you feel like you're in an active war zone. I've really never seen such a great visual representation of what a hive city should look like, and overall just every part of the game looks great. Not perfect, though. One criticism I do have is that for whatever reason, the shaders that the game uses visually can be hit or miss. There are some cases where the shaders applied can be kind of muddy looking, like for the bogs and jungles, there's a kind of green-blue haze that covers your screen. But it is one thing that I had to mention because I think it holds the game's graphics back from being perfect. That being said, the graphics still gets a solid 9 out of 10 from me. And now for the other obvious constant, the combat. The combat of Space Marine 2 is closer to an action slasher game than it is to a cover shooter. There's no cover mechanic whatsoever. Rather, you are intended to use your guns to kill and maim enemies before closing in and taking them out in close quarters combat. You have a permanent red health bar, which you can only heal through medical equipment, and a temporary white armor bar, which you can actively regenerate by performing executions on enemies. To evade damage, there's dodges, where you roll out of the way of incoming damage, and parries, which are like a light block, which allows you to kill smaller enemies and tank light attacks from the larger enemies. There's a variety of melee and ranged weapons, which allow you to customize your kit towards your preferred style of fighting, and there are a variety of enemies to use them on between the two factions. The game features prominently the Tyranids, followed by a secret Tzeentch invasion. Both enemy factions feel pretty good to fight, with Tyranids being more about melee combat and crowd control, whereas Chaos feels more like glass cannons, where they're able to do large amounts of damage but can easily be taken down. Both enemies also have 4 levels of enemies, ranging from little grunts like Chaos Guardsmen, all the way up to bosses such as Thousand Sun Sorcerers and Hive Tyrants. The combat system isn't perfect or really groundbreaking. In a lot of situations, it feels like really your best bet is just to roll spam, and unfortunately gun strikes lack invincibility frames, making them much less viable than melee parry, which is unfortunate for enemies like the Thousand Suns, since it's really hard to melee parry them. But the combat system does its job of forcing you typically from mid to close range as the fight goes on, and giving you plenty of opportunities to take down enemies in extremely violent ways. Overall, I'd rate the combat 7.5 out of 10. With those two basic things out of the way, now we can talk about the actual content. The game is a story campaign that has 6 missions that take place across 3 planets. 6 missions sounds short, and it kind of is. However, each mission takes over an hour to complete, and goes even crazier if you're on higher difficulties. It took me and my friends about 10 hours when we were playing on the extreme difficulty, and we hadn't even gotten all the little collectibles and gotten all the achievements. So if you're trying to 100% the game, you could easily get 20 to 30 hours of the campaign alone. As for the actual story, you are going to get exactly what you see. This game is the spiritual successor for Space Marine 1. There's no characterization, the story is not deep at all, and the story is really just a way to keep you moderately interested in the setting as you're cutting your way through 6 different massive levels. If you want a somewhat spoiler-free rundown of the story, basically the entire conflict centers around Titus and how he was inoculated to the Death Watch as a Black Shield, which he finds to bring shame, and so he, like in the first game, doesn't talk to his squad about much about anything, which makes his squad suspicious, before they resolve it in the last act of the game. Very light character work. I honestly forgot the names of the guys in Titus' squad, and Titus himself is just a brick who just says nuh-uh whenever his squad asks him for resources until he finally tells them what's going on. Now as for the actual plotline, it does a good job of keeping you interested. Now as for the actual gameplay of the campaign, I thought it was great. There's good mission variety since it takes place across 3 planets. You go to spaceports, hive cities, remote mechanicus research facilities, jungles, even crazier stuff in the last act of the game that I won't spoil. And on top of that, the gameplay does do a good job of keeping itself diverse. There are some points where it can feel a little bit repetitive, just killing the same enemies over and over. There's no puzzle segments or anything crazy like that. But it does a good job of using the tools it has to keep things interesting. It could be longer, but I don't feel like it's an unsatisfactory length. And to be honest, if you just want to sit down for 10 hours and play a solid 40k game without feeling like you have to get wrapped into doing every single thing that the game has to offer, it's a solid pick. For that reason, I'll give the campaign mode an 8 out of 10. And finally, we switch into the multiplayer, where this game's likely going to see its longevity. In the multiplayer, there's 2 modes. The easiest mode to talk about is the PvP. It's just 360 style tacked on PvP. If you're a fan of the old Gears of War games or Halo games, I think you'll like this kind of combat. I actually found it really engaging to run around and time grenades, and it made me feel like I was playing Halo Reach again. It's pretty unbalanced, and it's clearly not going to be the focus of the game, but it's just a fun way to hop into some slightly competitive modes to fight Chaos or Loyalist Space Marines for a little while you're bored. But for the mode that has the most potential, we have the operations. So the operations actually shadow the 6 existing missions in the campaign, and they're going to continue adding more for free as the game goes on. The operations are smaller set piece, smaller length, but vary slightly depending on the difficulty and just circumstance. Each operation is, I'd say, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on your difficulty and just random chance. Sometimes, for example, you'll enter a clearing and there will be light enemies, sometimes you'll enter there and there'll be a boss, other times you'll enter and there'll be nothing. The game has 6 classes, all of which have their own range of armor, which can all be customized in a modular fashion. You can spend money to unlock weapons or cosmetics like paint schemes, chapter iconography, special armor pieces like Deathwatch gauntlets. On top of that, as you level up a class, you get better looking armor pieces, and the customization is entirely modular. So if the paint's in the game, you can just make your own homebrew chapter or make your own chapter that's not represented through the successor chapter tree. I know I've already mentioned Halo Reach once in this video, but this is genuinely the best armor builder I've seen since Halo Reach. If you're a Space Marine tabletop player, this is actually probably the best painting reference there has ever been for Space Marines, and the devs are obviously going to expand this greatly as they go on. In the Q&A, they've said that they plan on including all successor chapters, which to me is kind of crazy. I'm guessing this just means that they're going to scrape the archives and find as many chapter icons as they can to be put on your shoulder pad. And then it's up to you to go track down the paint scheme, get it correct, and then throw that icon on your shoulder. Since it shouldn't be too hard to do, since as far as I can tell, the colors they're adding are just straight Citadel paint colors. The class leveling feels engaging, and you can probably get over 100 hours out of the game if you just want to grind out every single class and just be totally maxed out. But even if that isn't your thing, this still provides you with basically 50% extra of the campaign length, if not more. And although this mode is the most prone to being repetitive, it is also where you can probably get the most long-term enjoyment out of the game. So I'll rate the multiplayer overall 7 out of 10. Speaking of content, the roadmap for this game is looking pretty solid. There are microtransactions in this game, however they are in the form of purely cosmetic packs that specifically expand this range of armor available for specific chapters and successor chapters. I know microtransactions make a lot of people wince, but to be honest, I think this is basically the best monetization strategy. Of all the ways they could have monetized this game, this is probably the best case scenario because it allows them to keep getting money to support the game without having to lock feature content behind paywalls. There's no premium store or premium credits or anything where you have to worry about fear of missing out or artificially induced scarcity or any of that. Overall, the big conclusion is this game is not going to be dead in a few months. It's going to continue to get updates and releases well into next year. So with that in-depth review out of the way, I'm going to crush it all together and just say, this game is good. The game is technically live service, but you don't feel like it's shoved down your throat and you don't feel like it's hyper-monetized. On top of that, you just get a solid amount of content for your money. It's not the most content you could get, but then again, the amount of playtime you can get out of a game isn't necessarily how good it is. They monetize the game in a way that I found to be fair. The game is visually stunning, but not perfect. The combat is great, but not perfect. The multiplayer is fun, but not perfect. The game itself is just good, but not perfect. And that's fine. It won't win Game of the Year. It's not boundary pushing. It's not genre defining, but it doesn't try to be. It's just a fun and engaging game that you and your friends can hop into for a little while and rip and tear your way through Heretics and Xenos all day. So if you're a 40k player, I definitely recommend checking out this game. And if you're a fan of games like Halo, Gears of War, Helldivers, God of War, or anything of the sort, I definitely make sure to check it out. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, helps us out a lot. And if you had any thoughts or counterpoints to anything I said, be sure to leave it down in the comments. Have a good one. Yeah, fuck it. Charging the super light sword in my channel, man.
Drop it, drop it, drop it. Yeah.
We got it.
Big damage.
Our quarry took us on a merry chase through the dead zone. Excellent work, brother. Any contact with Delaz?
Literally psi attacks.